Hello, in this video I'm going to look at my final composition project and review it in my own way. I'm going to talk about the recording setup that I have and that I used. I'm going to talk about the instrumentation that was used, what I did differently. I'm going to talk about the style of the music which I produced for this project and for my two outcomes, and I'm going to discuss the pros and cons to how I was recording and the music that was then produced as my outcome 1 and outcome 2, and what was their strengths and weaknesses. So before I go any further, it'd probably be quite useful for me to describe what my project and theme was within my final composition project module. So my idea was to create music that was relating to a driving theme, in which case I prefer to write music as a singer-songwriter sort of style, so music doesn't mean enough to me without the lyrics most of the time, and I feel like I can create music more effectively that way. Saying that, I'm not a singer, so throughout the rest of this video I might mention it again and just mention that that is one of the pitfalls of this project, is the fact that having no one else there to sing on a regular basis so that I could record them and get them to portray what I needed them to portray, left me feeling like it was my responsibility in which to do it in the best way that I could, which again is not always the best. But that said, my project, so the first outcome was an arts collaboration, where I collaborated with an art student called Lauren, and I created a track for a video in which she made, and the track was to describe the journey in which we take to meet or to be with loved ones, which was quite easily relatable to a driving theme. So I looked into creating rock music for this module, which is my comfort zone. I've played in rock bands for a good few years now, and so the track that I created was effectively like a music video when combined with her video, and the themes in which she brought into the collaboration through the images that she created was quite good, because it tied in lyrically, and again that was a great success. The second outcome, which I've now submitted to David, is a 15-minute long mini rock opera. Is probably the best way to describe it. The idea was to speak as a character stuck in the car, who's obviously in for a long journey, stuck in traffic to begin with, hardly moving, begins to pick up some speed, has that that annoyance, that anger, and then throughout the piece it moves to the third section where there's this joyful sort of music, which is describing his freedom, in which he's now has a more open road and he speeds more, and then is stressed and tense because he feels that he's been caught by the police, or he has been caught speeding, in which case you get that through the fourth section, and then the I don't care, and him flooring it to try and either escape whatever it is that he's been caught from, whether it being a police or a camera, and then finally crashing and having to rebuild this vehicle in which he had loved. So this all ties into the theme of driving. It was just this very vague storyline in which I built, in which I could compose music in this form, and I tried to keep it vague in the sense that there was no character described. There was not like a man with blue hair, whatever, not that there would be a man with blue hair probably, but you never know. So it was just one of these things, that a storyline that I had, so that I could create the music and take the listener on a journey from being stuck to being free to rebuilding after having been reckless. So that's my projects in a nutshell, and that's how they related to the theme, which was driving. So I'd like to quickly just talk about like the creative process in which I used to write some of the songs. So I did a lot of listening to begin with. That's probably the best way to describe how I wrote all the parts to my two main submissions, and it depended on what I was working on, what I was listening to. So, for example, the first outcome, the sort of tracks that I was listening to at the time were sort of Richie Sambore's Undiscovered Soul, and like Fleetwood Mac and things like that, big rock anthem sort of styled songs. So, for example, if I haven't already said it, I'd like to just mention that everything I've composed, I played on this guitar before playing on pretty much anything else. This is probably the oldest guitar in the house and the worst, but it does the job for writing. So, firstly, I took the phrase or the style from Sambor for the first submission. So in his song Undiscovered Soul, he starts off with a low, and in which case I just embellished a couple of things within the key of E underneath that. So and then just its slow runs. And I used a lot of slide guitar in my parts, but for composing, I took literally exactly what my art collaboration partner had said the video would include, and I wrote lyrics that were close enough to that, and then just experimented with what I could do in a metaphorical sense. So I took the sort of the go your own way sort of feel. So for the chorus of the first submission, so I used like so just added more to it, so that it was more my own. It wasn't the same sort of driving rhythm as Go Your Own Way, but it had that feel and it had that urgency that the song needed. And I referenced another song which I had been listening to at the time, which I didn't include in my blog, which was Message in a Bottle. It's an old friend of old favourite of mine. So that the lyrics drop my message in a bottle. The whole idea about it was hope, or the idea that, you know, the journey would be worth what it was to see the loved one. So that's how I geared the song towards that, and used what I was listening to in my lyrics as well as in the music. For the larger composition, the 15-minute mini rock opera is what I've been calling it at the moment. So for Drive, that started with, funny enough, that started differently actually. Although I've said everything I've composed started with the guitar, David had been mentioning to a student at the time in class, and said about composing rhythms and then putting melodies to the rhythm. So when I was in the car driving, I was stuck in traffic and I was tapping on the wheel, and that's when I got the idea. So I began writing the first parts to my 15-minute composition Drive with simply just the rhythm. And then moved into the next section, which was still tapping. It all came from just tapping on the wheel. So this was section 2. So the idea was there. So Come on, my feverish wishes. Come on, my feverish wishes. And it all came from just tapping on the wheel and experimenting that way, and that's how the track moved forward until it got to the second section, where I then moved into apart from a track on the Rocky soundtrack from Rocky 3, which is an extremely sort of catchy rhythm. It's like so the idea is like I think it's called Take Me Back. So take me back, do do do. So for the second section, we were moving to where it was now moving, and I just remember watching that film at the time just by chance and thinking, it being in a street setting when Rocky had then moved in the film from one area to the next to try and progress, it seemed like something that I could use in my composition. So I started with something more driving, but kept it more minimalistic with the instrumentation to begin with. So and that's how that section. And then using that same rhythm which I had seen in the film, I then went on to compose the following section, which was the happier side. So it was the idea of movement, and this rhythm that had been associated with his change in environment. I used to change in my composition. So we moved from that section into the key of A, so from B minor to A. So we moved to, so it's the same like do 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 do. So I had that idea in my head. So I moved from being to A, where I went and just embellished it slightly, but adding that last part to the rhythm. And from that, I then composed the lyrics, which were based on the idea of not. The first line that I wrote was instead of shouting at the rain, which again came from driving when I was sitting in the car and I was stuck in traffic. And the idea was that even though it was raining outside, there's nothing you can do. It's like the weather, you can't control it. So it's the idea that the driver, the character behind the car, had let go of that idea of control, and when his opportunity was there to then speed up, he initially did, and that's how I wrote the lyrics for that section. And I ended it with the darker sort of chords that it has. So on a minor E, in which it's now tense for the character who feels as if they've been caught speeding or has been caught by the police, in which I tried to with the vocals. I tried to go to a high note in the sort of middle section on that third part. So it's where it's going to, and it's the highs and lows, the mountains roll below. So I went up to that note and I used some reverb and delay so I could channel it in different areas of the speakers. So similar to how a siren seems to wail around you. So that's how I was trying to still incorporate the idea of driving and the vehicles that were present in the pieces and the story. So we moved on to this section where I then, it isn't actually increased in tempo, although it sounds like it's the same tempo, but it's more urgent, and it was based on sort of life is like a highway rock songs where it's driving, you know, like that sort of feel. So I instead of playing something like that, I used the idea, and I was in the position where I wanted to use another instrument. I'll just quickly grab it, and I'm not actually sure what the instrument is called. So here it is, and it has quite a unique sound. I know it's supposed to be played by plucking, so as you can see, instead of doing that, I decided to hit it and recorded the sound when I hit it, and it gave this almost like a short gong or a drop sound, in which it was sort of sudden, and then it was like a sudden key change, because this, I believe, is tuned to F. So coming from F, I then moved to what I'd already been playing along to in like Life is a Highway and things like that, D. So I went from F to D, and kept that driving rhythm that I'd heard in so many of these other songs. And that's how I composed the next section. I kept that fairly concise with like lyrics, because there was less time for the character to think in my mind. So there was less things that he could say, or less things that he could say to himself is probably the better way of describing it. And from that part it then moves on to almost the final section. It's the second last section of it, the way I look at it. I'd referred to it as hightail it before, because it was something that I actually composed before composing all of the other parts, and it was something that I'd made for a task which David set at the start of the year, and it was based on rock opera songs. It was something that I'd heard from like parts of The Who and a mix of Meatloaf sort of influence, so there was rock and roll in it, and it was a good break in the song to go back up in tempo, because it's actually a higher tempo than the other song. And so it moved from being in that key to the key of, well, a lot of E major is in there, but it's probably more in the key of G, I suppose, from the way it works. But it moved straight into the so here the character isn't given as much of a toss about anything else throughout this journey. Doesn't matter whether he's been caught speeding or if somebody is chasing him, he is now taking everything into his own hands. He's speeding, he's doing exactly what he wants, and the song's supposed to be that sort of reckless rock and roll sort of style. So there's a reference to a movie scene, and it's the character feeling like this is his movie scene. It's the idea of like an ego or an arrogance that he now has being in the car, like so many drivers that we've come across when you are in the car. And so that leads to the crash, which is just basically a quick run that I've put together. And I discussed it with the bass. I asked the bass to move up the notes so that it was bringing it to an end, and added in the horn from my friend's Jaguar. So we had like a ends on the F sharp, and that then moved to B minor again, which then brings us full circle back to the parts that were in the initial section that was composed, so that I can end on a positive note, because we then return to what I refer to as section 3, which is now in the key of D, having been relatively in B minor to begin with there. So we're at the part that's back to that rocky themed idea of the do 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 do, but in the key of D this time. And this, the end message of the piece is to slow down next time, is to be a more conscious person or be a more conscious driver, because obviously he has crashed, he's ruined what he enjoyed, which is supposed to be the car, it's supposed to be the ability to drive. But obviously I've left it on the positive note where it seems to be rebuilding. That's where the rhythm comes back in with the bass and the drums. It's like the machine's getting going again, and just that he's wiser now, having not regretted what he did. He enjoyed the recklessness, and it was part of learning in my eyes, and that's how I've wrote the piece, and I hope that it's been translated that way. But this is just an idea how I came to composing music. Most of the time it was just sitting at the guitar and listening along to these acclaimed anthems and rock pieces and taking what I could from them and making them my own. Firstly, I'd like to show you what equipment and instruments were used in the recording of my music. So here we have the computer which was used. It is an Advent computer. It was purchased quite a long time ago now. At least we're talking maybe 8 years, somewhere in about that. And as you can see, the setup I have here is I've got two screens where I can see my mix and I can see the waveforms for the tracks. I've got a set of Yamaha speakers in which I can play back audio on. I'll give you a quick demo of that. I also have the Alesis Q49, which I used for recording MIDI parts or playing in parts, in which I could experiment more with phrases. Moving on, the amplifier that I used for most of the guitar parts was the Fender Mustang amp that I've had for maybe 4 years now. And the other instruments that I've laid about were used to create a lot of the sound, a lot of the Thomas Newman style music, which was present at the start of my Drive composition piece. Interestingly, you can see the ukulele was used on a number of tracks as well. For the music though, I only used the one pedal as such, and for other sections I used the talk box, which is crossing over between the guitar and the vocals. Speaking of the vocals, the majority of instruments that were recorded acoustically were recorded with this condenser microphone. It's a C1 microphone, and the other microphones used were a Shure SM58 as well. Moving on, number of basses were used. Here we can see the fretless bass. I have my brother who was kind enough to play on the tracks, as well as my other brother who allowed me to record him playing drums. And for the program which was used, it was Pro Tools 8, which is quite outdated now, but it seems to work fine for me. I can understand the system fairly well and operate it in an effective way. So moving on, for the instrumentation used in the tracks, the basis for the tracks was to perform in a rock style, which I am comfortable with. So the main focus was the bass, the drums, the guitar and the vocals. Vocals were what was needing the most work, as I'm not the most comfortable vocalist, and it's not something that I have done quite regularly. But this was my most comfortable style in which I could compose music or write songs and brief myself to doing this. So I am quite pleased with what I've created despite the lacking of my vocal technique. For the instrumentation though, as you'll hear, like with Outcome 1, that was a general rock track. So if I play that and we'll go forward slightly. Throughout the track, it is dominated by guitar, bass and drums, as you'll hear. And later on there is a cliche rock solo. I'll take you to that section. So here is the cliche rock solo, but this is a particular favourite style of mine. The music that I've created is something that I can relate to, and I hope is relatable in the sense that it connects to the driving theme, as rock music is traditionally associated with driving anthems. A number of CDs have been produced which include the likes of Boston's music, More Than a Feeling, sorry. So with that in mind, I'm quite pleased that the instrumentation's worked so well. Now I'll open up another section. So that was outcome one, my submission for that, which was an art collaboration. And this is the first section of outcome two that I'm going to look at in this video. This is where I tried something different with the instrumentation. I haven't been exposed to the likes of Steve Reich and Thomas Newman through David's classes. Minimalism was something that I wanted to try in my songs, but not make it the main style, because it's fairly new for me to compose in this way. So I attempted to record just odd instruments. I recorded my friend's car for some sounds as well. For example, even his keys, I recorded him just shaking his keys at one point, and I've used as much of it in the track as possible. You'll see that, like, for example, we have this drum here, which is the main drum for the first section of my composition, and it carries through at least, I think, six or 7 minutes of the track. And I'll let you hear the start. Take it back to the start. Here we go. You can also hear that the ukulele is actually taking the lead here. It's a much softer instrument, so it was interesting to include that rather than playing on the guitar for the majority of the track. So, moving on, for the instrumentation, finally, I'd like to mention the number of basses used in composition, because it's quite interesting for me to hear how much that changed the feel of certain tracks. For example, well, not certain tracks, certain sections, sorry. So, for example, if I'll go to the second section, and just need to go a little bit further forward to the second sort of verse. You'll hear the bass then enters at that point. Now for this track we actually used the 5-string bass to give it a more throaty and deep sound, in which case it was supposed to be reminiscent of this sort of exhaust sound which was recorded and added in at the start of this track. So if I take you to the section where the bass is leading, I would say. It might be hard to hear it in this recording, but in the link if you hear roughly about 6 minutes in, 5.5 minutes in, the bass takes the lead there, and it's a really throaty sound, and it helps show just the aggression present within the character that I've portrayed in this piece. So the final bass that I've not mentioned about is the fretless bass, which was actually used on the third section. So as you can see, the difference between using the 5-string straight into using the fretless bass is quite good for describing the tone of the track. And actually I have to say that I'm genuinely really pleased with how the drums and bass went, considering that neither of my brothers read music, and it was really just a discussion of what I needed them to play, and they generated something which was ideal for each of the sections of music which I was working on. So for part 3, if like here, the bass slides in at the beginning and is much more settled, again showing that this character's mood has changed. You'll hear the bass just here. So, with that section, it was much more relaxed. You can imagine being the driver of the car in this section, and just not caring so much about anything else behind you, and it has that kind of feel to it. And so, finally, to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of this process and the way in which it was done for myself in the creative aspect. This was quite a good learning curve for me. It allowed me to explore within my comfort zone the use of minimalism, and have that freedom to now take the lead in my music. And although not being the most talented singer, at least lead and describe exactly what I want to describe with the character and the theme that I chose. But with the equipment, there is obviously limitations. So with Pro Tools 8, again, we've moved on drastically from Pro Tools 8. It's 2018. We've got. I learned how to use Pro Tools on Pro Tools 11. So to go back and to use this, it is a step backwards. But for me, having the ability to create a lot of their sounds naturally, and using this just as the recording device and the mixing device was quite handy for me to learn more about the mixing process and more about how to not master but just improve the overall quality of the tracks. It was a good experience. But again, and pitfalls came in the form of my equipment all the time. So the fact that snapping a string or didn't have the same amount of preset sounds or the same power of sampling devices which Logic obviously has within the college held me back from creating music as quickly. But after speaking to David Watt, my lecturer, and discussing using the soundscape, I suppose, which was available in the university, we came to the conclusion it was much better, or it wasn't more authentic, but it would appear not to cheat the listener if I was to continue recording more natural sounds like street noise, which was used in the overall product for my outcome 2, so that it tied in with the natural instruments that were already recorded. Now there is a number of programmed instruments within the tracks. I'm not a piano player. I will play the parts that I think will fit, and then I will program them in so that they are within the time, have the right feel. But again, it's more time consuming doing it on this program rather than doing it on Logic or an updated version of Cubase. And finally, for a mixing device, if you'll see, if I open up a mixer, as you can see, it's a much different format for those that are used to using Logic, or those that are used to using Cubase. So it's getting used to using the different interfaces to get, maybe say, the better quality of mix out of the tracks. So in fairness, this has all been a good learning experience. It maybe has not been the most successful production, but for myself it has been a good experience producing the music and doing the majority of this all by myself. So thank you for listening and for watching this video, and hopefully it's given you more of an insight into the process in which I took to complete my final composition project. Cheers!